with a cause. This session is sponsored by Play Club, and we have Lilia Haua participating, director of the trust in favor of the Bosque Chapultepec. We advise you that this session will be recorded and can be made reference to in connection with NPR and on the online community of World Urban Parks. We thank our speaker and all of our attendees as well. Welcome. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here at this talk. I am Lilia Haua, director of the Bosque de Chapultepec Trust Fund since 15 years ago, and I'm very pleased to be able to share with all of you a little bit about the experience that we have developed throughout this long time. I would like to remain here much longer to be able to explain in greater detail, but we will be focusing on some specific campaigns that we have worked on. First of all, I'd like to share with you, I imagine many of you already know what the Bosque de Chapultepec is. Bosque de Chapultepec is one of the largest urban parks in Latin America. It has three sections, and we are about to connect a fourth section to it, which makes it one of the largest parks with almost 754 hectares. This is an urban forest that's very large. The first section is a historic section where we have the Chapultepec Castle, zoos, 8 museums. The second section is a recreational area where we have football parks and soccer parks and running tracks. The third section is an environmental area, and the fourth section is a part that used to be military field, which is now being turned into a forest as well. The environmental section, the forest was declared environmental value. It's actually a lung for Mexico City. There are more than 22 million inhabitants in Mexico City, so this makes it a very important and critical lung for those of us who live there. In the social aspect, what can I say? In the forest, everything happens. It's a very much alive forest. We receive more than 20 million visitors a year. Imagine weekends with 250,000 people going through. Very active with many activities, both social and cultural, as well as sports activities and recreation. In the cultural side, we have 8 of the main museums in Mexico City. We have the Anthropology Museum, the Tamayo Museum, Caracol Museum, Natural History, the Children's Museum. Anyway, we have a broad spectrum of activities, both cultural and recreational and sports activities. History, what can I say? We have the Chapultepec Castle. It's the jewel on the crown of Mexico's history. So many things have happened there. We have all the way from Moctezuma, Nezahualcóyotl, Hernán Cortés, Carlota. Everything has happened historically within this forest of Chapultepec. So it makes it a much wealthier forest than just a green urban space. It has a wealth of history since 3,500 years back. Actually, today, if we want to do reforestation in the forest, when we make our little hole to be able to plant our tree, there have to be specialists there, because if we dig more than 20 centimeters, we begin finding archaeological pieces. So it's a truly important jewel in history. Infrastructure. We have everything. We have bikeways, sports fields, cultural areas, mobility, and now we are about to build a cable bus which is going to communicate the 4 sections of the Chapultepec forest. It's so large that you can't walk through it in one day. So the idea is to create this tram car that can communicate the first, second, third, and fourth stage of this forest. Democracy. This means this forest is a highly democratic area. It's inclusive. We have a track for running. You can see the most well-known executive with bodyguards behind him running there, and people who live in the neighborhood next door. So it's an integration. It's a very inclusive, democratic, and safe area. And we welcome everyone. We have spaces for senior adults. We have a special place for senior adults. We have areas for children's playground where wheelchairs can access. We have a space for blind people within the botanical gardens. There's a sensorial garden where they can smell, touch, and hear. And that's what makes our forest different. It's a place for everyone, inclusive, equality, democracy. So, how does it work? What is the governance that the Chapultepec forest has? This is very important because that's what has led us to this great success. The trust fund next year will be 20 years of having worked in this successful formulation. On one hand, we have the Mexico City government. We have the chief of government, we have the Minister for Environment, General Director of Urban Parks, and then the Director of the Forest of Chapultepec. They are definitely the authorities. They are owners of this space, and they are the ones who decide what happens within this park. After that, we have a second institution that's extremely important for this formula. That is the guiding board of citizens. There's 7 members of civil society, brilliant people. We have architects, engineers, environmentalists, and journalists that give their time. They're appointed by the government at the moment, and they have a 6-year period, but they never come in at the same time that the head of government comes in. They're staggered, so that offers much more authenticity and democracy. It's not a political situation, but rather citizens who are well prepared, very intelligent, and they give this authenticity to the organism. What does this board do? This board of directors has meetings every month where the 3 different instances gather, and they present the different projects that the forest is working on. And this board gives positive or negative opinion or feedback on each of the different projects. For example, if Comex says, Lily, I'm going to donate 1,000 liters of purple paint so you can paint all your benches. Next day, I'm painting them. The board is going to say, no, hold on. All benches need to be green, Chapultepec green. You can't do that. So this board has great power, authority over what can and cannot be done within the bosque. Very autonomous and completely honorary. It's volunteer on their part. Next, the trust itself. The Probosque Chapultepec Trust Fund was made in 2004 when a group of businessmen realized that the Bosque de Chapultepec was in terrible condition. No one was investing a single dollar, and it was abandoned, trees in terrible condition, the lakes were completely filthy, the forest cleaning didn't exist. So this group of businessmen came together, also all honorary, and at one moment went to the head of government and said, we want to do something. How can we help for our forest to be in good conditions? So they created this trust fund. We reached an agreement where for every cent that the trust collects, the government of the city contributes another cent. So that's how little by little we have been re-enabling the Bosque de Chapultepec. It's very important to mention as well that this trust fund is here to stay. Authorities change over time, but the trust fund is the same always. That's what gives a certain continuity to this project. We don't see it to 2 years or 3 years out, but we have been here for 20 years. We have seen different administrations come and go, and that's the wealth of this trust fund. This part of mission and vision are very important. We take it on ourselves to collect funds, raise funds to be able to assign to different projects that we are working on within the Chapultepec forest, it's extremely important to always have a mission and vision. What are our values? And I love to say that our main value that we have within the trust is transparency. And that's a point where I do want to dwell on for a moment, because all of us here are here to raise funds. Transparency, believe me, is extremely important, not only internally, but also for your donors. When the donors see that truly they are, we have an audit. We have been audited by Deloitte since 14 years back. We have an accountant's dispatch that does all the documentation perfectly. We have reports and annual report information, and the donor feels very comfortable to see that every donation that we receive is being used in a transparent way, and we can say exactly how every resource is being used. What do we do? How do we do it? Before we begin raising funds, we need to have our projects underway. So we began in 2004 with a great master plan for the first section of the Chapultepec forest. This first section is all of this historic area that has a huge fence. The forest had to be closed down for almost a year. Very important work was done of dredging the lakes and cleaning the forest, and a lot of ambulant street vendors. We had a big problem with that. Little by little, we made this big master plan and created 25 different executive projects. Once we have all this spectrum of executive projects, then we sat down with the city government and said, what are the most feasible projects that the trust could finance, and what are those projects that the government should fund? If you make me fund sidewalks or things of very much infrastructure, it's much more difficult for me to raise the funds. But if you give me much more interesting projects for donors that could give greater visibility, it's much easier for us to be able to raise funds. From 2003 to 2008, we did a very important rehabilitation of the second section of the forest. We did a whole project for mobility, parking lots, and running track and skate park and fountains. And the change that we saw was impressive, to simply have this master plan and many different executive projects. There are occasions when one of the projects, for example, the running track, is funded by the two institutions. 40 million peso project where the city gives 20 million and the trust fund gives 20 million. Now, we never mix the resources. The resources that are raised by the trust fund, I know perfectly well where they come from, who gave them to me, and where I'm going to use them. The resources that come from the city government, they handle that. They have their controller, they have their evaluation system. So I'm never going to receive resources from the city government within my accounts for a single project. That's very important to mention. And currently we have a very important project that began in 2019-2024, when they say we're going to receive a fourth section to this Bosque de Chapultepec. We connected 75 hectares to the forest of Chapultepec. It's a project that comes from presidential orders, therefore it has a very great budget. This investment is being used for connectivity. We are making some pedestrian bridges to connect the first section with the second. Impressive bridges of 8 to 16 meters long. We're putting in the tram and many things having to do with infrastructure that are very important both culturally and in forest cleaning. How do we do this? Once I have this project, how do I raise funds? First of all, we have to select the project that we're going to work on within the master plan. That's what I was saying. It needs to be a very attractive project for donors, for them to really have this interest in wanting to donate or contribute to the project. It's a lot more sexy for them, and they can really be proud of a project if it's cultural or sports or environmental compared to a simple infrastructure project. So how do we do that? It's an interdisciplinary group that comes together. There are engineers, architects, environmentalists, people from civil society, and based on that, they decide to develop this great master plan. Once we have this, it needs to be approved by the Guiding Citizen Board, as well as the members of the trust fund, and obviously by the city authorities. This point is key because if people come to me and they say, "Hey, Lili, you need to raise funds for this project that I am imposing on you," well, no, I'm not going to work that way. I need to be in love with the project. I need to make the board also love the project and also make the city authorities love the project. And then we can all work together on one single project that becomes our project. And that makes a difference, an infinite difference, than to when you are imposed some project. So this part of the project, this conciliation, could take up to 6 or 8 months, but truly it's very important for all of us to feel that the project belongs to us. Public opinion. In these times where everything is made known by Twitter and Instagram and the social media, it's so important that neighbors and people who are in this space I want to put in an Olympic field when people want a running track, so that's no use. We might have a lot of good ideas that could make the project look really nice, but it's not actually what the people want. So inviting these people to participate in a certain way is very healthy for the project, and at the same time, once you begin with the project, it becomes part of you and they become your allies and a part of communication that's very important. Instead of slowing down the project, they become your communicators. It makes the project much more feasible and to have a good use after the project is finished. The execution of the project, okay, well, that's the development of the project and fundraising. This is where the trust fund comes in. Generally, we pay for the master plans because with that, we have the facility, the ease of being able to select the group of architects that we're going to invite. We invite 6 or 7 different groups of architects. We do a contest and invitation. And once we decide which firm is going to take that contest, that project, then we start raising funds. How do we raise funds? Well, I'd love to go really slowly on each one of these topics, but I don't have that much time. I'm going to try to be as explicit as possible. First, it depends what project we're going to fund. That's key. Not all donors participate in all the projects. It's very important to be able to have that sensitivity, who I'm going to ask for what. If I'm doing a culture project, I sit down with my database and I start looking what are the foundations and the organizations and the large donors that are interested in culture or in sports or in environment. Currently, the larger foundations are more and more with a defined line of who they want to contribute to, if they want to contribute to health or to environment. And it's very important to be able to define and have that sensitivity of who I'm going to ask for what. That's our job. So a very important part of our fundraising comes from large foundations and companies. They could be national companies or transnational companies. And what I was saying is key. Having that accuracy of arriving with the donor when the donor is looking for a project. Just yesterday we were in a conversation and I was saying many large companies need to comply with social responsibility. They need to comply with ESR and they have to comply. What they're looking for are attractive projects, green projects, a lot of them having to do with cleaning up public spaces and forests. What works for them is that they are large companies that contribute pollution and infrastructure, and so for their yearly reports they need to take off that burden off their conscience, and they can say, I'm a green company because I support these public spaces. So that click is important. You need to keep that in mind and be able to identify it in companies. Another part is raised from international organizations. For example, we were doing the rehabilitation or renovation of the old military college, a building from year 1700, scaffolded, about to fall down. And when we almost concluded the first section, we could not find resources. And many years later, we sat down, we applied to the War Moment Fund. They accept 50 and choose 5. We were chosen. So it's very important for you to value the gravity that your project has, whether it's historical or environmental, whatever it is, but there are many international organizations that are searching for these projects internationally, around the world. So don't be afraid of applying. Apply. If you win, great, and if not, it's experience to be able to apply the next year, and no problem. What's important is that all these organizations know what you are doing, and at one point it will click and you will receive an important donation. So for the same reason, it's very important to have transparency. These international organisms look at everything. You need to have your finances transparent, your audits, and everything very orderly and very professional so that you can receive this type of donations, which are very large and important. And once an international organism donates, it's much easier to be able to then collect or raise funds with other organizations. Institutions such as the World Resource Institute, maybe they don't give you that much financial resource, but they give you a very important support of know-how. They have specialists. For example, we participate in a water project that was very large, and they set out on the table 7 of the main water engineers, not only in Mexico, but in the world. So that also is important. Not everything is money and resources, but also the intellectual part, the talent. It's useful. It strengthens your project and your own fundraising. At the end, it's like a savings, or it's also a project itself. Events. What can I tell you? At Bosque de Chapultepec, it's a very much alive forest. In one single day, we could have 3, 4, or 5 events. Most of them are free, but we have many fundraising events, such as races, concerts. There are concerts where we have 17,000 people attending, and it's a ticket that costs 100 pesos. But there are concerts that are for 1,000 people, and the tickets cost 5,000 pesos. So it depends on where you want to focus the kind of event. That's the kind of fundraising that you will get. And donations that we love, that's where I'm going to focus most of my talk, is community donations. How the community can get involved by giving these donations, and this helps for them to feel that it's their project as well as their park. And when they are investing resource or time or money, they become spokesmen for the Bosque de Chapultepec. So it's very important. This is little by little. They contribute small amounts, but at the end, the sum is a very large sum. I'm going to share 2 very specific examples because the presentation is called Fundraising Campaigns, and it's something that everyone can apply at any project that you have or that you're going to develop in the place where you are. The first project is renovation of Parque Lomas. This is a park in the second section of the Chapultepec forest, and this was a space that was completely abandoned at some moment. There were maybe some small soccer fields. It was invaded by homeless and people who lived there, and it was just a space beside a cemetery, unsafe, ugly. Nobody wanted to spend much time there. The first thing we did was go to the community and say, what do you want at this space? What shall we do with this? The great majority said they wanted soccer fields, okay? So then we contracted the architect, Mario Sheknan. We did a large executive project, 60 million pesos. We have 3 soccer fields that are impressive with great lighting, with the best facilities, a cafeteria, with lockers, with children's playground. And now what do? How are we going to get the funds, those 60 million pesos? We have the project, we have the will of all of these neighbors, and now we need to start doing fundraising. So we began with a campaign concept. The first thing you have to do is say, okay, what's important in this space? In this particular space, it was a green area. There were many trees that we had to pull out. They were dead, and we had to do important reforestation project of trees between 4 and 6 meters tall, more than 150 trees, and we said that's something the community loves, planting a tree, being part of this. We said, let's take hold of this. So we made a concept of a campaign, extremely successful. The campaign was called Give a Tree to Chapultepec. The trees were important. We didn't plant 1,020 centimeter trees, no. We planted 150 trees with the proper specifications and the vegetation palette authorized for the forest. The trees have to have between 4 and 6 meters high. They have to have a certain thickness of the trunk, etc. So the trees are much more expensive. The trees were going to cost about 6,000 pesos each. So what did we do? We invited all of society through social media. You will see all the social media platforms that we have. Whether it was just a single donation or a donation where several friends come together and say, let's buy a tree or let's donate a tree, or donations from companies, and they could do it over 1 month or over 3 months or 6 months or a year. This part is very fun in the campaigns. Although you want to promote them, I'm not a celebrity. No one knows me. I'm not on television. So it's very important to always look for these people who are influencers. They can make your message arrive to people immediately. So Dario Yazbek joined our campaign. We want to plant 150 trees more. A tree can absorb up to 20 kilograms of carbon in a year. Carbon dioxide. The trees can reduce temperature by 3 degrees. So how are we going to donate these trees? Well, donation is easy. Planting a tree, not that easy, but don't worry, we'll take care of the hard part. The donation can be done at this website, chapultepec.org.mx. If you prefer, you can get together with your friends, collect a sum, and donate. It's a great opportunity so that we can do this together. That's an example of one of the many influencers that we had. We had a reach that we would never have been able to have. We reached people all over the place, not only in Mexico, international donations, etc. So this becomes much more fun on a live campaign where many people want to participate. We created a microsite, a special microsite for this campaign. It was called Give Away a Tree to Chapultepec, and You have to follow all the steps. When you're asking for a donation, it has to be very easy, very simple, and you have to give people a lot of alternatives to be able to donate, whether it be PayPal or Mercado Pago or different payment mechanisms, credit card. But you have to make it easy for the donor, for them to just click and make a donation. We had an impressive campaign broadcast publishing. We had a presence in magazines, newspapers, radio, television, all over the place. It was a campaign that truly had a tremendous reach. This allowed us to cover and exceed our goal. So, broadcasting the campaign on social media and all media, very important. And another thing that also comes together to make these campaigns actually reach people are what we call activations. You always have to have something related so that these campaigns can flow and communicate much better, and you can raise a lot more. In this case, it's the example of one of the companies that joined us. They formed groups, they made activities. We go as a trust fund and we offer, we say, do you want to share this with your collaborators or with the people that you work with? And many companies, as I was saying, are avidly looking for something that will bring their people together. And this type of project is a hit. So teams come together. Marketing team competes against the finance team, and in one of those, they made a row where they were putting 20 peso bills in a row to see which team, which department could collect more 20 peso bills. And so it's just a matter of creating different ideas, but for people want to donate, and green projects is a fact. You need to be creative, but it can be done. Another very important part of campaigns is learning to say thank you. Thank you and thank you and thank you. In this case, everyone who donated on that campaign of Give Away a Tree, we gave them some gratitude plaques right at the soccer fields. This doesn't only make them donate on that project, having their name there and being part of it, they are so proud of it that they're anxious to see what the next campaign will be that we launch. Well, thank you for donating on social media, and we sent them a personalized letter to every single one of the donors with their name signed by me and saying, thank you so much. Your contribution is truly important for this project, for the community, and for the Chapultepec forest. Always remember to say thank you, however you like, but saying thank you is extremely important. At the end, we raised 405,000 pesos only for these 150 trees, which exceeded our expectations, and it was a delight to be able to involve all of these people on this campaign. So this is what the areas looked like in the past. That's the space there. And that's how it looks today. Obviously, we had an inaugural event. And the most important part about this space is that today it's a live space, but not only do we we charge about 23 pesos per player to go in. But one of the fields is always free. It's always free because these fields are next to neighborhood, Tacubaya and America, a very low resource, low income neighborhood. So bringing all these people to come and participate and be a part of us is enriching to the project as well. The next fundraiser campaign that I'm going to share, this year we had the inauguration. It's a project that is the Quixote Fountain. It's a hidden away place in the first section of the forest. It's 1921 fountain, a replica of a fountain in Seville, in the Maria Luisa Park. All of this was damaged, destroyed, and there was a fence around it that was choking up the trees and the space. This is part of the actions that we took for the renovation of the fountain. We hired specialists for this because it's considered a historic monument. So we hired architects, engineers, specialists in historic monuments. We developed our concept for the campaign. The whole campaign had its logo, its design, branding. And this campaign came up because one day I was in my office and kind of a hippie American citizen comes in and he says, "Hi, Lily. Nice to meet you. My name is Steve." And I said, "Okay, Steve, I'm Lily." He says, "I work at Google. I'm from Seattle, and I love that fountain. I'm in love with that place, and it's completely trashed and abandoned. How can I help? What can I do? I'm here to help." So that's how we began developing the whole concept for this campaign. Simultaneously, he kicked off a campaign as an individual, as Steve from Google in Seattle, on his social media in the States. And one day, a campaign that you had very located in Mexico, is reaching thousands of people in Google, in the Google company in the US. So you always have to be open to new initiatives that arrive. In this case, we did something different. Here we had the opportunity of having a great fundraiser event. It was a concert of 1,500 people. We brought the symphonic orchestra from Mexico City. We brought a Spanish guitar player, Carlos Sainz. We brought folklore ballet. We had a wonderful casting together with the board of the Chapultepec Forest. We did it very near the heritage altar. It was a great success. We almost raised all the resources necessary to be able to do that project. But likewise, we did a specific campaign so that everyone who wanted to join could. We had an influencer, that's Benny Barra, a singer. We weren't able to play the video right now, but Benny Barra, who was an actor and singer, he personified the Quixote. It's very much related because this fountain is the Quixote fountain. What did we do? Once again, our microsite dedicated especially to adopting an adventure by Quixote. Every tile, what we did here is that the fountain is made up of 4 benches, and every bench is made up of these hand-painted tiles that narrate the life of Quixote de la Mancha. So we thought, how about every person adopt one of these tiles? Every tile had a value of 1,500 pesos. It could be a single payment or different payments or coming together with other people. And here, this was our way of saying thanks. Very successful, by the way. Every person who donated one tile, for example, the Quixote tile, we would send them on paper printed exactly the tile that they had donated for, and on the back side we have the whole story of that specific tile. So, for example, we reached the people involved in culture, in arts, people who love the forest. We reached many different fronts. And one day, one of the donors wrote to Vic Moreno, who's here with me, and said, "I want one, I want 2, I want 5. He ended up buying 12. At the end of the campaign, he shows us in his room what he did. He framed all those thank you cards that we sent, and he did a spectacular showcase. So something we never imagined would happen. But what I want to tell you by this is that thanking these people that join your campaigns is very motivating. Broadcasting of the campaign on all social media is fundamental. We also had a very different kind of activation. Since it was cultural, what we did here is we went to some schools. There is a school called Humanitary, and they took the project as a school project, and so it had to do with the history subject, but also with drawing, also with Spanish, also with literature. So within every one of the different classrooms, they did fundraising campaigns. And at the end, all of the children at school came and walked through the Bosque de Chapultepec. They got to know the whole Quijote de la Mancha story, and they contributed to a project. So it's very important for you to see what different communities can be onboarded, recruited, to not always be asking from the same people. We had our thank you card, our thank you plaques, and we sent the personal thank you letter. For example, that's Steve McPherson. That's a thanks that we sent him. The results, we raised 405,000 pesos. That's how it looked before. That's how it is today. We had our inaugural event. Obviously, we invited all the donors, always with the authorities present, the director of the Bosque, the Minister of Environment. We always work together on all of our projects. After that, once we had the space ready, we did through the directing board of Chapultepec Forest, we activated this place. So we had theater acts, parables, storytelling, more people. You see this place and it's now active. So what is our formula? I wanted to more or less illustrate it here. First, very important, we need to have a clear project, concise, with reachable goals. Second, making up a digital campaign with strategy, content, guidelines, and very important, measurement. Thirdly, public relations through companies, schools, media, through people who do sports, depending on what your project is looking for. Then a spokesperson. A spokesperson gives credibility and reach to your campaign. And then these activations, whether they be digital, reforestation with donors, depending on the project that you're working with, and your thanks. Always tangible, always personalized, always with transparency in the progress of the results. And this part, I would also like to say, it's very important for all donors. For example, month over month, I send a very professional report of how I'm using the resource. If there's some problem on the project, because every project has some problem, no problem. We need to share it. There's no reason to cover it up. We need to say we're stuck. Instead of 2 months, it's going to take us 4 because this happened. But being transparent, being clear, and reporting professionally and with transparency is something that donors really feel comfortable with. And I share as experience. We have donors who have given us 1, 2, 3 years, 7 years consecutively. At the beginning, they would say, I want my resource specifically to go to this. And now they say, Lily, use the resource however you want, for whatever project you want. I trust you. I know that whatever project you do is going to have a beginning and an end, and it's going to be well executed and accepted by all visitors. So when you make your reports, clear, concise, professional, and transparent. And that's how I close. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, please go ahead. Do any of you have a question? Let's take 3 questions. We have very little time. Another talk is beginning in a few minutes, so 3 questions here. Thank you. Congratulations, Lily, for everything you do. A question. When you say how much the project is going to cost, do you include everything that has to do with broadcasting, sharing? with the plaques that you send out. Is that included in the project cost? And how long do they last? We have already raised about 600 million pesos through different campaigns. But yes, at the moment that you do your executive project, you have to include something that no one includes is all the supervision or the tax included, because tax is always really small. You always have to keep in mind, include taxes, include the oversight and supervision, and also the think. This is another talk I would have loved to share, but the alliances that we have are also very important. As trust funds, it's important to have allies. So communication, media are our allies. Our spokespersons know us. But at the beginning, when you develop this alliance, you do need to include a section for publicity and promotion. Another question here. Hi, Lili. Congratulations. My question, do you think it's possible, or what would your advice be, to scale this system, this method that you have followed, to a level of neighborhood park, like at a city level? Is it possible to create this trilogy and follow the same process? Thank you, Gustavo. A very good question. Yes, no doubt it is possible. You always have to have the goodwill. Here what's important is that the authorities that are over that space have the will to create it, because remember, they leave, so they need to say, yes, I want that to remain and transcend no matter who comes after me. Many times they're kind of jealous. They're jealous of their administration or their political party that they belong to. But an example are us. Community board, it's important to be included in the city administration, and a group of businessmen who live in the neighborhood or nearby who want to support, that can be done. We have had many conversations, for example, with people in Azcapotzalco, conversations with people from zoos. Right now, zoos are looking us up to replicate the same scheme diagram that we have, but for the zoos in the city. And we have come together with the Natural History Museum, and they're creating exactly the same trust fund that we have applied to museums. So it doesn't have to be exclusive only for a forest. This model can be replicated and is proven in museums and zoos, as long as the three instances are in alignment, and the commitment that the businessmen and the board have, they need to know that it's long-term. Okay, well, I think that what we have learned here will be useful. What we have seen is that we need to think. So I would ask you to give a round of applause to Lili for all of her experience that she has shared with us that we can now use for ourselves. Thanks to the sponsor that sponsored this event, and we invite you to stay on for the next talk. It's a panel, and if not, you can move on to where you would like to continue learning on this great Congress. Thank you very much, Lili.